Next up on the Locked On Sabres podcast, will the Sabres buy out Jeff Skinner this summer, and should they buy out Jeff Skinner? We'll look back on his season and what his future could hold here in Buffalo. A little bit on Jordan Greenway today as well. We got 2 exit interviews for you on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Sneaky Joe DiBiase on the show today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And we've got 2 guys to talk about, Jeff Skinner and Jordan Greenway. Also, the World Championships continuing. No action since we spoke to you last. Sweden with Rasmus Dahlin is through to the semis. Dylan Cousins, Bowen Byram, Owen Power also through to the semis with that big win by Canada yesterday as well. And if you want to count Victor Olofsson, I'm not inclined to, because he's almost certainly not going to play another game for the Sabres. But if you want him added to that list, he will be playing for Sweden in the semis as well. JJ Peterka's tournament ends for Team Germany. So the Worlds continue. The playoffs continue. Connor McDavid, the double overtime winner, after almost being probably the subject of a lot of hot takes this morning, because he has not been scoring goals. He has looked a little bit injured in these playoffs, but he hasn't been scoring. And then overtime against Dallas, the Stars erase a 2-0 deficit. Tyler Seguin scores twice. That game goes to overtime. Connor McDavid takes a 4-minute high sticking penalty. His teammates go out there and kill it off after the captain accidentally but put them in a really tough situation. Then McDavid, all alone in front of Jake Ottinger, has the whole net to shoot at. And it almost looked like he froze a little bit, or hesitated, whatever you want to call it, but it was just long enough so that Ottinger could get his stick over there and Heiskanen could get his stick over there, and McDavid was not able to get the winner in the first overtime. Second overtime, there's McDavid standing in front of the net. Evan Bouchard puts it right on his tape, and he's able to deflect it or one-time it past Ottinger for the winner. Again, those couple of moments earlier in overtime, you could have had some hot takes about McDavid this morning, but he stopped that from being a possibility by winning it for the Oilers. And I am absolutely rooting for McDavid to be in the finals. I don't even know if I've decided whether I want him to win it or not. I think I do, but I want him in the finals. The most interesting final for me, I want to say by far, but I don't even know that the East really matters for me on this. But Oilers-Panthers would be awesome. The Panthers are a good watch. They are an exciting watch. They're a growing brand in the sport. They were in the finals last year. Tkachuk versus McDavid. They've actually had run-ins, of course, way in the past with the Battle of Alberta all the time. McDavid does not like Tkachuk, as most players in the league don't like Tkachuk. Get McDavid in the finals. The other side, I guess I'm okay either way. If it's McDavid at New York, I mean, that's pretty big too, right? If you're wanting to grow the sport as much as you can, get as many eyeballs as possible, get as many eyeballs on him, on McDavid, as possible, him playing at Madison Square Garden for a championship would be pretty sweet. I think Florida's going to get through, though, and I am rooting for Edmonton to get through as well. If we go back to my playoff predictions a few weeks ago, I believe I had Edmonton at New York in the Stanley Cup final. So I'm not just doing that because I want to be right. I want to see that in part because I think it would be a huge stage for the world's best player. 1-0 Edmonton in that series and 1-0 Florida in the other series. Lot to get to on today's show, Sabre-related, of course. We got Jordan Greenway to talk about a little bit later on in his season. I think he's being completely misused in certain situations, but that was by Don Granato. We don't know how Lindy Ruff will want to operate with Jordan Greenway. So we'll get to him coming up in a little bit. And by the way, before we dive in on Jeff Skinner, if you want to get in our text line, you can do that by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres to sign up. If you're already a texter, you can just shoot us a text, and we're always looking to read the questions or comments on the show. Looking back on the last couple of texts from the last couple of days, one texter, okay, talking about Carolina. Brett Pesce possibly going to hit free agency and smoke around Martin Necas trade. Krebs, Rosine, and maybe a second for Necas, who's a RFA, by the way. Necas is a dream trade target. It has been for a while. Now, what's interesting is I tweeted about Necas yesterday. This is a centerman, 70 points last year. This year, lower than that, came back down to earth a little bit, but he's a restricted free agent, a centerman, a very young one, and still at only 25 years old for the production he's had. I was trying to get that exact point total. 53 points this year after 71 last year. Love the idea. I don't know if Carolina has the money to pay him. I jokingly tweeted yesterday when it came out that Don Waddell was going to be stepping away as Hurricanes general manager. Why don't, just a complete joke. I know this is not serious. Trade Kevin Adams to Carolina for Martin Necas. See what they say. Terry, call them up. See if do they want their GM? He's buddies with Rod Brindamore. And if they needed someone to run their organization, why not the guy that's won the Stanley Cup there and now has GM experience? I don't need to push that anymore anyways, because one, I'm not really serious about it. Obviously, who's trading GMs. Two, the Hurricanes have already landed on their guy. Tulosti is going to be their interim GM, at least for the time being. I like the Necas idea, though, a lot from that texter, and I'll make him the subject of one of our episodes coming up in June as we try to figure out targets and trade markets and also free agency for the Sabres. I think this guy, Necas, makes a lot of sense for what they would want and what they would need. Let's get to Jeff Skinner, a former Carolina Hurricane that could become a former Buffalo Sabre relatively soon. Let's explore Skinner's season and also how likely is a buyout for Jeff Skinner. Well, first, let's start with the season that he just had, because it was a step back, no doubt about it. He went from his best season as a Sabre, and I would put that above the 40-goal season. Last year, 35 goals, 47 assists, 82 points. A guy who had never had more than 63 points in a season had 82, blew away his career high in assists. It was his best playmaking season as a pro. And it wasn't just secondary assists. There were great passes Skinner was making all year long that helped Tage Thompson get to that 47 goal mark. Now, it helps when you have Tage Thompson as a 40-goal scorer, finishing the way he did to help you get that assist total higher. He also scored goals. I mean, him, Tuck, and Thompson were so good together. One of the best offensive lines in hockey 1 year ago. This year, still played with those two a lot. Majority of the season. It was whenever they were healthy, and they weren't always healthy. Tuck missed some games. Thompson obviously missed a month. Skinner missed a few games as well over the period of time. 8 games for him that he missed last year. When everybody was healthy, for the most part, they were still together. But they did not get the results. Less than a third of the goals at 5-on-5 for that line this year compared to last year. Skinner took a step back. And I would say he went from a bad defensive player to a truly one of the worst in the sport, complete liability in any situation where you might expect him to be in his own end. He was a non-factor in that department, even more so than he's been in the past. Skinner is a one-dimensional hockey player. But I think if you look at his season, you can still find a player that is usable in a specialized role. Last season, it was actually not going that bad. Our judgment on Skinner is going to be based a lot in how the season ended. The season ended with him being a total non-factor. In the final 12 games of the season, 0 goals and 1 assist. Absolutely brutal production. No production at all from Jeff Skinner in the final 12 games of the season. Much of that was spent, in fact, all of that was spent with Peyton Krebs and Jordan Greenway on his line. So, and sometimes a little bit Zach Benson, but Greenway more so. That period of time is going to be a basis for why I think his role needs to be carefully used going forward if he's going to remain on the team. That was an example of what not to do. We know Jeff Skinner. We know for his whole career, going back to the Kruger days and before that, Housley and in the Carolina days, he is a very good goal scorer. He's a great offensive player, but he needs a good to great, at least, centerman to set him up, to get him into the scoring areas, to clean up the rebounds from. He needs someone else to drive the play, and then he will give you the goal scoring. He will execute around that super skilled centerman. And Peyton Krebs was not up to the task at the end of last year, fell way short of my expectation for Krebs, and given what his draft profile was and what he was as a prospect in Vegas and what he had started to build up as the fourth line for the Sabres, Krebs did not give Skinner what he needed in terms of scoring chances, in terms of playmaking. It wasn't there. If you go before those final 12 games, where by far his most common line mates were the two that we talked about earlier with Tage Thompson and Alex Tuch. In the 61 games, the first 61 games of his season, where it was mostly Tage and Tuch, he had 24 goals and 21 assists. 45 points in 61 games. That is not bad at all. In fact, it's nearly a 30-goal pace. If you look at the 82-game pace based on that original stretch of time, it's a 32-goal pace in the first 61 games of the year. And if he scored 32 goals, nobody would be talking about Jeff Skinner being bought out. Nobody would be talking about Jeff Skinner hitting the cliff or being, completely shot. And that was with an injured Tage Thompson, that he was on pace for 32 goals. That was with an Alex Tuch who did see a regression in his goals and his shooting percentage. Skinner was on pace for 32 goals. Okay, so what's the lesson? The lesson is what it's always been with Jeff Skinner. If you're going to have him on your team, you got to play him in the top 6. There's no other way around it. If you want him on your team and you want him to produce, you only have one choice. He's got to be in your top 6. You don't have to play him on the first power play unit because he's actually not a great power play player. He was okay last year, but he's never been great at it. 5-on-5 scoring in the top 6. That's what you are getting from Jeff Skinner. And it's never been any different than that. If you want to tell me, okay, well, I don't want him in the top 6, get him a better third-line center, more skilled third-line center, maybe that's better than Peyton Krebs, okay, maybe that can work in a more specialized role. But the lesson from last year is the guy scored goals at a similar clip to what he's always scored goals at when he played with Thompson. Not rocket science. This is not that complicated of a player. He might feel like a complicated, player because of the way ahead is kind of complicated. He's not complicated. He's never been complicated. It's always super easy with him. If you play him with top players, he's going to come through for you. If you play him with bad players, he's going to stink. That's it. More than other players for that. If you play Sidney Crosby, obviously I go to the most extreme end of this. Play Crosby with bad players, he'll still be Sidney Crosby. He'll still be great. If you play Jack Eichel with bad players, remember we used to play with Benoit Pouliot on this team? He'll still be Jack Eichel. If even like guys like Thomas Vanek back in the day, play Thomas Vanek with whoever, Luke Adam at center, he'll still be Thomas Vanek. That's not true of Jeff Skinner. You can't play Jeff Skinner with those guys and expect him to be Jeff Skinner because his deficiencies, as we saw last year, he's not a guy that carries the puck into the zone. He's not a guy that gets set up. He's not a guy that creates his own scoring chances all that often. He's not a very good player possessing the puck himself. He gets the puck, gets it off his stick quickly. He'll use his edges. He'll use his angles. He will finish on the chances he has. He's a very high probability of finishing on a goal. And he's very good at cashing in on rebounds in front of the net. So that's Skinner. We know this. We've always known this. It's not rocket science. I don't think his season was as bad as we thought it was. It always just comes down to utilization. His stats come down to that. And because he played on a bottom six line at the end of last year, largely with Peyton Krebs and Jordan Greenway, that's why you look at the numbers and you see the biggest regression from him. That's all it was. It was they played him with bad players at the end, and he doesn't perform with bad players. He never has. He never will. So what does that mean? What does that mean for the future? All of that being said, I think there are two ways to go about this, and only two. I'm scared the Sabres are going to go a third route, and it's going to be very bad. I'll explain what I mean by that when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, talking some Jeff Skinner here. We are presented here on the show by Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices. You got some views from your seat. Their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. All of those, by the way, are available sometimes not just up to the event, but even an hour after the event if you're looking to go late. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals, select seats ahead of the game or event. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose your seats. Lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, will the Buffalo Sabres buy out Jeff Skinner? We'll get into that in 1 second. Reminder, if you're looking for your NBA playoff coverage, NHL playoff coverage, NFL offseason, check out Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 stream, all always available on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Skinner and a buyout. How likely is it, and is it a good idea? As I mentioned going into the break there, I think there are only two options the Sabres should have for this guy, and I'm afraid they're going to pick a third. Let me start with the two paths that I think are acceptable. One is to keep Jeff Skinner on the team, play him with a skilled centerman, and hope you get the top results. Play him in offensive zone starts, power play if you want it. I typically prefer him more in the second power play unit as opposed to the first. Don't play him in 3-on-3 overtime. Use him in the right situations. When you're in the offensive zone and you're taking the face-off there, get him on the ice. And get him out there with a Tage Thompson or a Dylan Cousins or a centerman to not be maybe Martin Necas from Carolina. Don't play him with Peyton Krebs. Don't play him with some fourth-line centerman that you signed that scores 10 goals a year. Who did I have in my mock offseason a few weeks ago? Teddy Bluger from Vancouver. If you go sign Teddy Bluger to be your fourth-line center from the Canucks, do not play Jeff Skinner with that guy. It's not going to work in any way. It's not going to work offensively, and it's not going to work defensively. That's what not to do. Either play him in the top of the lineup with top centers. That's option one. Or option two is wipe your hands clean, find a way to get him off the team. And with his contract, that's going to be difficult, but it shouldn't be impossible. Skinner has 3 years remaining on his contract at $9 million a year. There are two ways to get him off the team. One is a trade where you are giving somebody else something to take him. I saw a couple weeks ago there was a Chicago blog that wrote about the possibility of the Blackhawks acquiring Jeff Skinner in a bit of a salary dump situation for him to come play with Connor Bedard in their top six as they are starting to transition from a rebuilding team. They want to be a little bit more competitive, but they still are focused on getting future assets. And the Chicago blog said, two birds with one stone. Give Skinner a better goal scorer than Bedard had on his team last year. He has no good wingers. So Skinner goes right to the top line with Bedard, and he'll score goals with Connor Bedard. I guarantee you that. Skinner would score 30 goals in Chicago, at least, with Connor Bedard. And two, if you're Chicago, you get something in return for doing the Sabres a favor of taking the $9 million. I think they had like a second-round pick. I might think it takes more than that, honestly, because it's such an investment, but maybe that's all it would take is a couple $1 million. That's option one for getting Jeff Skinner off the team. The other option is a straight buyout. Buying him out, and that would be a 6-year commitment. And if you want to figure out what that is, go to Cap Friendly, hit the Skinner page, hit buy out the current contract, see what it looks like. And you have a 6-year commitment. It goes $1.4 million, then $4.4 million, then $6.4 million. That's the first 3 years. Very different. You get a lot of cap relief right away. $7.5 million of cap relief in year one. $4.5 million that you're taking on in year two was not great. The big key here is, do the Sabres feel like in 3 years, when they should be competing and competing in a big way, do they want to be committing $6.4 million to somebody that has not played on their team in three years? And then you have $2.4 million for 3 years after that. $2.4 million in each of 2028, 2029, and 2030. A long period of time you have to commit if you want to buy him out. Also not impossible. Of the 6 years of buyout, 5 of them are manageable. But there's that one real bad year, $6.4 million in 2026-27, that I think could scare the Sabres off of doing it. And maybe look to just keep him on the team for one more year and see how it goes. Those are the options with Jeff Skinner. If I were to rank them, I would say my top option, if you're asking me, I'm a Skinner defender. I like Skinner. I think you got to use him in certain ways, though. My top option for Skinner is keep him on the team, play him in the top 6, and cross your fingers that he doesn't hit the wall completely. Option 2 is get him off the team. Either buy him out or trade him away with an asset to get somebody to take him. Option 3 is keep him on the team and play him in a depth role. I think that is the worst option. That is going to be the biggest waste of time, where you're going to have the worst results and you're going to be basically wasting a roster spot. But this team wants to be more decisive. They want to be more aggressive. They want to be a tougher team to play against. And Lindy's coming in. I wonder how Lindy will look at Skinner. On one angle, I might think Lindy was going to want a certain type of player. He's going to want to change the culture. He's going to want to change how they play, be tougher to play against, a little bit more. I'm trying to think of the word Kevin Adams used. But whatever. You know what I mean? The type of player Lindy might want to build around. Skinner doesn't fit that. But it's not like Lindy has never coached a player like Skinner before, who is very good offensively, very poor defensively. Offensively, it is the Max Affinaganoffs of the world. It's the Alesh Kodaliks of the world. There's not a lot of them, but there's a few of them. And And I do believe that that is where Lindy is going to try to test things out with Jeff Skinner, is in that way. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills. Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. Streamlining hiring with powerful tools that find you matched candidates. With Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed data in the U.S. Even better, Indeed's the only job site where you pay for applications that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed is an unbelievably powerful hiring platform, delivering 4 times more hires than all the other job sites combined. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Sneaky Joe DiBiase. If you are watching along on our YouTube channel, you might notice that I'm no longer wearing a white t-shirt. I'm wearing the 1999 Eastern Conference Champions shirt for the Sabres. we had electricians over at the house, had to turn the power off for a little bit. So I'm actually recording this hours after the first two segments, talking about Jeff Skinner a little bit. And by the way, I'm heading to Ireland tomorrow, so we'll be a little bit of a week or so here without an episode, but I'll have my phone on me, and if there's any type of breaking news with the Sabres, if they trade for Martin Necas in the next couple of weeks, I'll get you some breaking news content while I'm overseas in Ireland for that. That's if that happens. This is the slow season in the offseason, so I am definitely not expecting anything to happen with the Sabres in the next couple of weeks, but you never know. Getting to Jordan Greenway on today's show. We talked about Skinner, buyout options, the probability that that could happen, what it would look like. Jordan Greenway, his season and his future. We'll spend a segment here talking about Greenway. And this is a player that is a hard evaluation for me because I think he was better than I was expecting this past season. For the reminder, last year, I hated Greenway when he first showed up for the Sabres. Did not like his game at all. I thought he was supposed to be this high-energy physical player, and he's physical, no doubt, 6'6", 231 pounds. The big body is there, but energy, skating, just no way, man. Like super slow, and didn't seem like he was a high motor guy that's always chasing after you, relentless on the forecheck. Those are the types of power forward energy guys in your bottom six that I think they should have a lot of. So Greenway comes into this year, and there are a couple of ways to look at his season for me. There's a positive and there's a negative. The positive is that Jordan Greenway did a very good job in the things that Jordan Greenway is good at or supposed to be good at. Jordan Greenway is supposed to be a defensive forward that plays in your bottom six. And this past season, he was tremendous defensively. He was a guy that dominated on their penalty kill. He was somebody that 5-on-5 gave very good defensive results as well. Greenway, if you look at his evolving hockey charts, he was a 77th percentile defender last year for the Buffalo Sabres. 77th percentile defender. 21st percentile offense. So he was definitely a one-dimensional player for the Sabres last year. His power play offense got way too many minutes, did not perform in that regard. Even strength defense, though, one of the better forwards that the Sabres had. In fact, probably their best forward all year in that area. But my problem with Greenway is while he was so good defensively, he was asked to do way too much. He was asked to be a scorer. He was asked to be one of their most important players at times. He was somebody that was on the ice several times this season when they were down one with minutes to go, trying to tie the hockey game. Who was out there? Thompson was out there, Tuck was out there, and Dahlin was out there, and you had Byram at the end of the season who was out there. Cousins would be out there, and Greenway would be out there. Jordan Greenway would be out there. Why is he over guys like Casey Middlestad, who would have been on the team? Skinner, of course. Zach Benson, if you want him. How about Peterka or Quinn in the few games that he played? Why was Greenway getting the nod over those guys? And it was usually because he's going to stand in front of the net. He's going to be a net front presence. But far too often, he lurks outside of that area. And there was one game on the road in the winter. I can't remember the exact opponent, but I remember the moment where it's a minute left and the Sabres have possession and they have an open shot at the right flank. And who's the guy taking the shot? Jordan Greenway. I didn't even realize he was on the ice yet. Down one with a minute left in that situation. And of course, the shot is nowhere near the net. It's a terrible shot. No heat on it whatsoever. Maybe it was even blocked, but whatever. I remember thinking, what is he doing out there? Who put him out there for that? You've got big bodies. Why can't Tuck stand in front of the net? Why? Skinner is good in front of the net. I know he's small, but Skinner is good in front of the net. You don't need Greenway for that. You don't need him in that situation. his most common teammates this past season. Look at who was number one. Casey Middlestat, one of their most skilled, their most consistently skilled center all season long. Behind him, Zach Benson, Dylan Cousins, Alex Tuck, Tage Thompson. Those were Greenway's most common line mates at forward. Middlestat, Benson, Cousins, Tuck, Thompson. Way too skilled. Way too many important core pieces that Greenway was being asked to play with. Then you got to Peyton Krebs. That's more like it. That was the guy he probably should have been playing with all year. The problem with that is Kyle Okposo, Zemgus Girgensons are playing on your fourth line. Greenway doesn't have a spot. But now Okposo's gone. Hopefully Girgensons will be gone as well. And Greenway should have, in my opinion, a role on a bottom six line, ideally with Peyton Krebs going forward. Go be a defensive-only player. No more asking him to score goals. No more on the power play. We know what he is. He's not that young of a player. In fact, he's not really a young player at all. He's 27 years old. He will not play much longer in the NHL. Not with that foot speed, he won't. He has played 7 years in the NHL, and his career high in goals is 12, and that was 6 years ago. He's not going to give you more than what he just gave you. And what he just gave you was 28 points. Not a guy that should ever be asked to play in offensive situations like he was. Put him in the bottom six, and you're fine. Now, the future, not just the role for Greenway in the future, but the contract for Jordan Greenway. He has 1 year remaining on his contract at $3 million. At 28 years old, as I just mentioned, I think that foot speed is very concerning for his 30s. Not a guy I would want to sign back. Maybe on a 1 year deal. He is so good defensively. He is such a good penalty killer. If you can bring him back on a 1 year deal for very cheap after this coming season, I say you do it. Any type of commitment to Jordan Greenway, I'm not into. I would much rather see them replace Greenway with a player of similar size, a big guy, throws his body around, 6'6", but has more of the energy, has more of the speed, the tenacity that I think Greenway is really lacking. He, by the way, is a modified no-trade list, 8 teams. So if for some reason the Sabres season's gone off the rails again and we're all mad again, could be a guy that's available at the deadline and they get something for it. Jordan Greenway, that's a look at his season and what's ahead. All right, I am off to Ireland again. If something comes up, we'll check in. I'll keep tuned in, do a lot of driving, you know, the flights, of course, as well. I'll check in on the text line, of course, as well. The World Championships you've got, and then there are trades that could be made. Ryan McDonough was just sent from Nashville to Tampa the other day, so deals can be made, but usually the floodgates don't open until the end of the Stanley Cup final, and I'll be back before the Stanley Cup final, I think, even begins. June 4th, I got to fly back. So enjoy, everybody, your nice weather, your Memorial Day, and hey, I'm actually hopeful that we get some news for the Sabres because that would be, of course, fun for everybody. Thanks for listening to the Locked On Sabres podcast, making us your first listen every day. Talk to you in a couple weeks here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.